10 years had passed, but for Jalen, it felt like yesterday. The wind rustled through the dry autumn trees as he stood at the edge of Ashmore Cemetery, the place he had avoided for a decade. He hadn't visited his sister's grave since the day of her funeral. He was only 8 when it happened, too young to fully understand the weight of grief, too young to ask the questions that haunted him for years. Now 18, taller, sharper, and far more restless, Jalen had returned. Not with flowers, but with something heavier in his heart. Doubt. He had lived with it ever since that one conversation, a whispered confession from an aunt during a family argument. One sentence that shattered his memories. Your sister's death wasn't what they told you. No one in the family would talk about it after that. His mother cried every time he asked. His father refused to speak her name. There were no pictures of her in the house anymore. No belongings, no birthday acknowledgments. It was like she had been erased. That silence raised more than suspicion. It created a storm inside Jalen. And now, after years of questions building up like pressure behind a dam, he had made a decision. He would see the truth for himself. The sun was starting to set as he approached her grave, a simple headstone surrounded by overgrown grass. The name Leora Wills, beloved daughter and sister, was barely visible through the dirt-stained granite. Jalen dropped to one knee, brushing the stone with his sleeve. His backpack lay open beside him, revealing a crowbar, gloves, a flashlight, and a folded letter. That letter was what truly pushed him over the edge. It arrived anonymously 3 days ago. No return address, no explanation. Just 5 words. She's not where they put her. He had stared at that note for hours, sleepless nights replaying the day of her funeral over and over. The closed casket, his parents' refusal to let him say goodbye, the hurried burial, the immediate silence afterward. Now he had reached the point of no return. As the cemetery grew darker, Jalen pulled on his gloves and began clearing the dirt. He wasn't afraid of getting caught. This wasn't about rebellion or revenge. It was about knowing. He dug until his arms ached, his breath short and clouding in the cool air. And then he struck wood. His chest tightened. His hand trembled as he scraped away the last layer of dirt until the full shape of the coffin was revealed. He sat back, staring at it, breathing heavily. This was it, the box that had haunted his dreams since childhood. He reached for the crowbar, placed it between the seal, and paused. Leora, he whispered, I don't know what they did, but I swear I'll find the truth. And then, with one deep breath, he pried the lid open. The sound was sharp, final, like a scream caught in wood. And what he saw inside wasn't what he expected. Inside the coffin, there was no body. Jalen froze, the crowbar slipping from his fingers and hitting the ground with a dull thud. His heart pounded so violently it felt like it was knocking against his ribs. The coffin wasn't empty. It was filled with items, carefully arranged, almost like someone had curated them. An old stuffed rabbit with one button eye, a photo album with torn-out pages, and at the center, a small sealed envelope with his name on it. Not to Jalen, not dear brother, just his name, handwritten, in ink that had faded, but not completely, like it had been waiting for him. He reached for it slowly, his hands shaking. Everything else, the rabbit, the photos, the coffin itself, blurred in the edges of his vision. He opened the envelope with a trembling thumb, unfolding the paper inside. There were only 2 lines. They didn't let me go. They made it look like I was gone, but I'm still here. Jalen's breath hitched. He read it again, and again. Each time the meaning changed, deepened. Leora had written this, not their parents, not someone pretending. He recognized her awkward loops in the handwriting. She always curled her L's too far. It was real. This letter was real. But what did she mean? They didn't let me go. He looked back into the coffin, heart thundering in his chest. What was this? Some kind of cruel setup? A prank? A message? Or worse, a cover-up? Jalen pulled the photo album into his lap, flipping through the first few pages. Most were blank, but a few had old photographs tucked into the corners. Photos he didn't recognize. Not family events or school photos. These were strange places. A room with walls painted entirely black, a cracked mirror with the reflection of someone who wasn't in the frame, and one photo of a girl, maybe Leora, standing outside what looked like an abandoned hospital. There was a mark on the wall behind her, a symbol, a circle with a vertical line slashed through it. Jalen flipped the photo over. On the back, scrawled in the same handwriting as the letter, were the words, "Look for the one who watched." His mouth went dry. Something was deeply wrong here. He remembered now, at the funeral there had been a man, someone none of the family recognized. He wore black, stood near the back, never approached the casket, and disappeared before anyone could speak to him. Jalen had always assumed he was just someone from his sister's school. But what if he wasn't? What if he had been the watcher? Suddenly, something snapped behind him. Jalen turned sharply. Nothing. Just wind whistling through the trees and the sound of dry leaves skittering across stone. But he felt it. That feeling you get when you're not alone. He shoved the album and letter into his backpack and covered the coffin again, hands moving quickly now. Not out of guilt, but urgency. Whatever this was, it wasn't finished. Leora hadn't died, at least, not in the way everyone said she had. And Jalen was beginning to understand. They'd buried a story, not a body. Jalen's heart raced as he scrambled to his feet, his mind spinning with the images of the photos and the cryptic messages. The graveyard seemed suddenly too quiet, too empty, like the earth itself was watching him. He could still feel the weight of the coffin, the sealed letter, and the strange mark in the photos. It was a puzzle, and the pieces were slipping away from him faster than he could grasp them. He took one last look at the grave, the coffin now securely closed again. But that didn't ease his discomfort. If anything, it made it worse. Leora had been hiding something. She'd been alive when they told him she was gone. She had left him clues, clues that no one had bothered to notice. The wind picked up again, tugging at the collar of his jacket. It felt like a warning. Jalen didn't know what to do with himself. He couldn't just leave, not when he was so close to the answers. He had to know what had really happened. So he decided to do what he should have done long ago. Find the watcher. With the sun sinking lower, casting long shadows over the tombstones, Jalen made his way to the edge of the cemetery. His breath felt shallow, a mix of cold air and nervous anticipation. His footsteps were muffled by the grass, but the sound of his own heartbeat pounded in his ears. He reached the edge of the cemetery, looking down the darkened road that led into town. The watcher had been at the funeral 10 years ago. Where was he now? Jalen paused at the fence. There was no sign of anyone waiting, no shadow lurking in the distance. But there was something else, something that caught his eye. A small, narrow path winding through the trees on the other side of the road. It was faint, hidden beneath the growing darkness. Without thinking, he stepped toward it, pulling his jacket tighter around himself. The path was barely visible, like it had been purposefully forgotten. And then he remembered, the abandoned hospital. It clicked in his mind. One of the photos from the album had shown a dilapidated building on the outskirts of town. The hospital had been closed for years, but he had heard rumors. People said it had once been a place for troubled patients, people who couldn't be helped. But there were no records, no sign it ever existed. It was almost as if someone wanted to erase it from history. Could that be where they took her? The further Jalen walked down the path, the thicker the fog grew. By the time he reached the edge of the trees, he could barely see more than a few feet in front of him. The air felt colder, thick with something that was hard to place. Then he saw it. The building loomed in front of him like a silent sentinel, its windows shattered and boarded up, its roof sagging under years of neglect. The abandoned hospital. It wasn't much more than a ruin, but it held an eerie power that made Jalen's skin crawl. Something about it was familiar and wrong. He had to be close now. Whatever the truth was, it had to be here. There had to be something left, something they hadn't buried or hidden away. A sound broke the silence. Jalen froze, every muscle in his body tensed, his breath hitched in his throat. He turned toward the sound. Footsteps, slow, measured, not his own. A figure appeared through the fog, just a silhouette, but unmistakable. The Watcher. He stepped closer, the figure moving with purpose. His body obscured in shadow, but his presence loomed. Jalen didn't know whether to run or confront him, but his feet betrayed him, taking one hesitant step forward. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, waiting. "Who are you?" Jalen's voice was more demanding than he had intended, but the anger inside him was rising. The truth was just out of his reach, and it was too much to bear. The figure didn't respond at first. Then he spoke, his voice low and deliberate. "You shouldn't have come, Jalen." Jalen's eyes widened. He knew this voice. He didn't know how, but he did. The Watcher had spoken directly to him at the funeral. "What do you want from me?" Jalen's heart raced as he took a step closer. The figure tilted his head, his form coming into clearer view. He was older than Jalen expected, but there was something unsettling about his eyes, an emptiness in them that didn't belong to someone who was alive. "I've come for the truth," the figure finally said, "but you may not be ready for it." Jalen's fist clenched. "I'm ready. Tell me everything. What happened to my sister?" The figure took a slow step forward, his voice lowering as he spoke again. "She was never supposed to die, but she couldn't be saved. Not by anyone in this world. There were consequences for her actions." Jalen stared at the man, his confusion growing. "What are you talking about?" The figure slowly raised his hand and pointed to the abandoned hospital behind him. "She's still here. She never left." Jalen's breath caught in his throat, his heart pounding in his chest as the words echoed in his mind. "She's still here. She never left." The figure's voice, cold and unsettling, hung in the air like a dark cloud. Jalen felt as though the ground beneath him had shifted, and the reality he thought he knew was suddenly, irreversibly, broken. He stepped back, the fog pressing in around him, thickening. "What do you mean she never left?" "What are you saying?" he demanded, his voice shaking, though he tried to mask it with defiance. The figure's gaze was unreadable, but there was a flicker of something like sorrow, beneath his eyes. He didn't speak right away. Instead, he motioned for Jalen to follow him, turning toward the decaying hospital. Jalen hesitated for a moment, a chill creeping down his spine. But something inside him, a need to know the truth, pushed him forward. The figure led the way, his steps sure, even as the old building loomed over them like a forgotten monument to something dark. The hospital was even worse up close. Broken windows, rusted doors, and the faint smell of rot in the air. It didn't look like a place where people had lived or worked. It looked like a place where secrets had been buried long ago. And Jalen knew deep down that his sister was part of those secrets. As they entered the building, the air grew colder still. The wind outside howled, but it couldn't penetrate the thick walls. The only sound was their footsteps on the cracked tile floor, echoing in the hollow silence of the abandoned space. The figure led Jalen deeper into the building, past long, empty hallways and boarded-up rooms. They stopped in front of a door at the end of a narrow corridor, its frame barely holding together, as if it had been forgotten by time itself. The figure turned toward him, his face a mask of sorrow. "She's behind this door, Jalen, but you won't understand what you see." Jalen's heart raced as he reached for the doorknob. "I need to understand. I need to know." He opened the door. Inside was a room that looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. Dusty furniture covered in white sheets, a single dim light hanging from the ceiling, casting long shadows on the walls. The room felt strangely familiar, like it had been part of his life, even though he had never seen it before. And there, in the center of the room, was a bed, neatly made. On the bed lay a girl, still and lifeless, her hands folded over her chest. The girl's face was pale, but there was something about her that felt wrong, like she was caught between two worlds. Jalen stepped forward, his breath shallow. It was her. It was Leora, but she was different. The girl on the bed wasn't the vibrant sister he had lost. This version of her was frozen, trapped. "What is this? What did they do to her?" Jalen's voice cracked as he looked at the figure standing behind him. The figure's face softened, but his voice was heavy. She was a part of something she didn't fully understand. And when she tried to leave it, they took her soul, her mind. What you're seeing is a part of her they couldn't destroy, but they couldn't allow it to live either. Jalen shook his head in disbelief. Why did they do this? Why couldn't anyone tell me the truth? Because it's not a truth meant for everyone. Not for you, Jalen. Not until now. The figure stepped closer to the bed, his hand hovering just above the still form of Leora. You wanted the truth, but sometimes the truth is more dangerous than the lie. Jalen felt a shiver run down his spine. His sister was there, yet she wasn't. This was not the person he had known. The body before him was an empty shell, alive, but not alive. Something had been stripped away, stolen. He stepped forward, reaching out to touch her hand. As his fingers brushed hers, something strange happened. A shock ran up his arm, a wave of cold that seemed to pierce his very soul. The room seemed to warp around him. The walls creaked. The floor groaned beneath his feet. Leora's eyes flickered open, but they were no longer her eyes. The pupils were wide, unnaturally so, and they glowed faintly, as if something else was staring out from behind them. She blinked slowly and then whispered, her voice strained and cracked. I couldn't escape. They wouldn't let me, and now, neither can you. Jalen stumbled back, his pulse racing, his breath caught in his throat. The figure stood behind him, watching silently, waiting for Jalen to process the horror before him. The room felt smaller, the walls closed in, the air suffocating. The door slammed shut behind him. And that was when Jalen realized he wasn't just in a hospital. He was in a prison that had been built to keep the truth locked away. Jalen's mind raced as the door slammed shut behind him, the sound echoing in the confines of the small room. His heart hammered in his chest, his breath coming in shallow gasps. The world around him seemed to warp, bending and stretching as if it was trying to swallow him whole. Leora's eyes, wide and glowing, seemed to pierce through him, cutting through the growing panic in his mind. I couldn't escape. They wouldn't let me. And now, neither can you. Her voice, hollow and unearthly, sent a chill down his spine. The words felt like a curse, a warning he hadn't been ready for. His legs shook beneath him as he stepped backward, the reality of what he was seeing pressing down on him. This wasn't the sister he remembered. This was something else, something far more sinister. Something trapped. What did they do to you? Jalen whispered, his voice trembling as he reached toward her, though his hands were unsure, hesitating as if afraid to touch the truth that might consume him. Leora's form trembled, like the air around her had become unstable. She didn't speak again, but the whispering grew louder, a cacophony of voices in his head. Voices that didn't belong to her, voices from another time. Get out. He's coming. They'll never stop. Never let go. The figure, the watcher, stepped forward, his presence suddenly more imposing than before. His face remained hidden beneath the shadow of the mask, but his voice broke the eerie silence. She was never meant to be freed. None of them were. He spoke with finality, his voice heavy with regret. The system you're trying to unravel? The hospital? The one my sister was in? Jalen's voice broke through the haze of confusion and fear. He was grasping for anything solid to hold on to. It wasn't a hospital. The watcher's voice seemed to grow darker, more ancient. It was a place of containment, for souls, for memories, for the ones who should have been forgotten. Your sister was chosen to carry something she couldn't understand, something that could never be allowed to grow. Jalen's mind reeled. Chosen? What do you mean chosen? This is insane. She was just a little girl, a regular kid. Why would she be part of this? And why didn't anyone tell me? Why did they lie? Why? Because, the figure interrupted, his tone cold but not without a trace of sympathy. The truth is too dangerous. The darkness she carried inside her. It was too powerful to be understood. It had to be hidden. And the more she tried to fight it, the more they had to lock it away. But she was never meant to stay in the dark. You! He turned his gaze to Jalen, his eyes piercing through the shadows. You are the key now. Jalen took a step back, his mind spinning. Key? What do you mean? The figure nodded, his eyes full of meaning, like he was watching the final piece of a puzzle fall into place. The seal, the thing that keeps everything locked away. It's broken now, because she was never truly gone. She was transformed. And when she woke up, it meant something. Suddenly the ground trembled. The floor beneath Jalen's feet cracked, and the lights in the room flickered. Something heavy, something ancient was beginning to stir. Jalen felt the change in the air, the pressure, and instinctively he stepped back. But his feet were rooted to the floor, like the room itself was pulling him deeper into its darkness. "You have to make a choice, Jalen," the figure said, stepping closer. His presence was suffocating now, and Jalen felt the coldness settle into his bones. "You can let her go, let this all stay buried, or you can face what was left behind. You can free her, but you will need to face what comes next, what waits beneath the surface." Jalen's breath was shallow as he tried to understand, to process what was happening. His sister, Leora, wasn't just a victim of some cruel fate. She had been part of something far older, something that had waited for the right moment to break free. And now that moment had come. But at what cost? The room shook again, more violently this time. The walls groaned and cracked as if they were alive, as if the hospital itself was fighting against the intrusion. The lights dimmed to an eerie glow, and in that moment, Jalen knew. He had no choice. He had to face the truth, no matter how terrifying, no matter how painful. He turned to the bed where Leora lay. Her eyes were still open, but her expression was empty, lifeless. The glow in her eyes faded as her mouth moved, forming words that didn't make sense. "Please, free me." Jalen's heart skipped a beat. Was this truly his sister, or something else? Something far darker. Without another word, he turned back to the watcher. "How?" The figure's gaze hardened. "You already know the answer. It's the same choice she made long ago, to accept what was taken or to release it. You have to decide now." A thunderous sound echoed from the depths of the hospital, and the temperature dropped even further. The very walls screamed with ancient power, with memories long buried, waiting for release. Jalen's breath hitched. This was it, the final choice, and he had to make it now. Jalen stood frozen, his body locked in place by the weight of the decision before him. The air around him seemed to bend with tension, as if the very room was holding its breath. The watcher's cold gaze was unyielding, waiting for Jalen to make his choice. He turned back to Leora's body, the girl he had once loved, the girl who had once laughed with him and played in the yard. But now all he saw was a hollow shell, something that wasn't quite her anymore. And the realization hit him like a blow. She wasn't just trapped in this body. She had been part of something dark, ancient. Jalen's heart raced as he stepped toward the bed. His hand hovered above her, unsure. Should he reach out? Should he try to free her? Would it even be possible? And what would happen if he did? What would happen if he didn't? The watcher's voice broke through his thoughts. "You must choose, Jalen. Time is running out." Jalen took a deep breath, looking down at the floor. The decision felt heavier than anything he had ever known, but he couldn't let this continue. He couldn't live in ignorance anymore. He couldn't let the secrets of the past bind him and his family to this curse. With shaking hands, he reached out toward his sister's lifeless form. Her skin was cold, her body unnaturally still. But as his fingers brushed against her arm, something shifted. The air around them crackled, and Jalen felt a rush of power surge through him, like a dam breaking open. And for the briefest moment, it felt like the entire building was alive, throbbing with energy. He staggered backward, dizzy from the force of it. Then Leora's eyes snapped open. Her gaze wasn't empty anymore. It was full of pain, full of something more. But there was recognition there too. It was her. "Jalen," she whispered, her voice raspy, as if the words were struggling to break free from something ancient and suffocating. "Help me. I can't break free. They won't let me." The watcher stepped forward, his figure tall and shadowed, blocking the light as he approached the bed. "You cannot release her. The seal has been broken. The price has been paid." Jalen looked at him, feeling the weight of his words sink in. The watcher's face, still hidden beneath the mask, remained cold, unfeeling. But there was something in his eyes that Jalen couldn't shake, a sadness. She was never meant to be freed. The watcher's voice softened slightly. None of them were. You don't understand the cost. Jalen's anger flared, and he turned to face him. I don't care. I don't care about any of this. She's my sister. His voice cracked, a mix of fury and heartbreak. I don't care about your rules or your ancient seals. I'll save her, whatever the cost. For a long moment, the watcher stood silent. Then finally he spoke. So be it. The temperature in the room plummeted. A screeching wind ripped through the hospital's decaying halls, the walls groaning with the strain of something being torn apart. Jalen's vision blurred as a bright light flared around them, and he felt the world tilt, like he was being pulled in all directions at once. Leora's body convulsed on the bed, her hands reaching for Jalen. He grasped her wrists, holding tight as her soul seemed to battle within her. Jalen! Leora's voice echoed, but it was no longer just her. It was a chorus, hundreds of voices whispering from the dark recesses of time. The air shimmered with the sound. You should have let it rest, but now you must face it. Jalen squeezed his eyes shut, the whispers rising in volume, pushing at his mind. But he wouldn't stop. He couldn't stop. With a final cry, he pulled her to him, and in that moment, everything broke. The light erupted into a blinding flash, filling every corner of the room with an intensity that made the walls shudder. And when the light faded, the hospital was silent once more. Jalen blinked against the sudden darkness. And there, standing before him, was Leora. Not the hollow-eyed, trapped version of her, but the girl he had lost. Alive. Real. She looked at him, her face full of relief, but also something more. You did it. You freed me. Jalen couldn't speak. The weight of what he had just done was crashing down on him, his heart still racing from the intensity of the release. But in her eyes, in the way she was standing there before him, he knew. She was free, and so was he. But the watcher was gone. The room was empty, and outside the first rays of dawn broke through the fog. Leora stepped forward, her hand reaching out to him. Come on, Jalen, we have to leave. There's more to do. Jalen looked around one last time at the abandoned building. He had freed his sister. But the truth, the full truth, it still haunted him, hiding in the shadows. He didn't know what would come next, or what the cost of freeing her would mean. But he didn't care. He had made his choice. And no matter what, he would face it, with Leora by his side.
Subscribe and press the bell icon so that you never miss the amazing video.